I think this cycle hits 200 very easily. I think that's kind of a done deal. It could go a lot farther. I have every confidence gold will get to 5,000, 10,000, maybe 15,000. But while it's doing that, Bitcoin's going to go from 100,000 to a million, and from a million to 2 million. And you can ignore Bitcoin if you want to, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring Bitcoin, because it's going to go to millions of dollars a coin. And if you knew about it and you didn't take the time to study it and think about whether that was something you wanted to do, you missed it.
Mr. Lawrence Lepard, thank you so much for joining me here again today, being a playable character in a sea of non-playable characters. Thank you, sir.
Good to be with you, Brandon. I always enjoy our conversations.
We got so many things going on. Let's start here, actually. Saylor, right out of the gate, explain what he's doing. He's attacking Bitcoin with a desire unknown to mankind right now. And could you kind of run down, he's going to, certain years, he's going to do 21 billion and he's already eating all that up and he's just devouring the market. What is exactly going on here with Saylor?
Well, he's really, he doesn't say this, okay, because he's more politically wise than to say it, but he's really conducting an attack on the currency market, very much. In fact, I think Max Kaiser had a great tweet where he said that, just like Soros attacked the Bank of England and forced them to revalue the pound, in a way, Saylor is kind of attacking the sovereign strength of the dollar. Like I say, he won't say it that way. He doesn't want it to be perceived that way to the powers that be, but it really is what he's doing. I mean, he's making an enormous bet, obviously, and it continues to grow and grow ahead of schedule, whereby he's exchanging paper in his company, whether it be debt or equity or preferred stock. But he raises capital in dollar terms that he owes back in either debt or equity or preferred returns. And then he uses that capital to buy a better form of capital, which we all know is Bitcoin. And, and so that act on his part is really kind of an attack on the underlying value of the capital of the dollar, because he's exchanging dollar debt for sound money, digital sound money asset, namely Bitcoin. And that's what's going to happen worldwide. Everybody is going to do what Saylor's doing before this is all over. It's just that we're at the very early days, because as you know, a $2 trillion market cap of Bitcoin on 900 trillion of global financial assets. I mean, Bitcoin is still only 0.2% of all the global assets out there if you include real estate in the bucket. So, what Saylor is just saying is, I know mathematically that these guys cannot continue to hold the value of the existing money, and so I'm going to borrow in that money and I'm going to invest into a sounder money. And he's doing it over and over again. And as you know, he announced a couple of programs where he would raise money at the market and then buy coin, and he's ahead of schedule. He's just, every time he turns around, he figures a way to, raise more capital on attractive terms and deploy it into Bitcoin. And of course, as Bitcoin continues to go up, it becomes reflexive, where his returns look even better. And then there are more people who want to invest with him, and so on and so forth. I mean, very much in the same way that the sovereign debt cycle is a reflexive negative feedback loop, where they have to continually issue more and more and more debt to keep the government solvent. And it gets worse as interest expenses get worse. Saylor's doing the exact same thing in reverse. He's borrowing in that currency, but putting it into a better currency. And this is true. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, he raises these converts at 0% interest. And that's because his prior converts have had, they've paid very low rates of interest, and they've had, 47% upside. I mean, what convertible bond manager expects to get a return of 30, 40, 50% in a couple of years? I mean, if they got that return over 10 or 15 years, they'd be happy. So, yeah, I mean, it just, because what he's doing makes so much sense, it attracts more capital, and then more capital accelerates the whole process. So it really is kind of an amazing financial flywheel that he's found. And I don't think most of the world has really taken the time to deeply understand this and just how profound this is. I mean, it's like he's found a money machine. And so, eventually the world will figure that out. He'll have competitors, et cetera, but not right now. He's all alone.
What are your thoughts on SOB 121 being repealed, and just how you see that filtering through the system, maybe how quickly that might happen potentially?
Yeah, let's deal with all that. That's a great question. And there's a lot going on, that's some positive, some negative. I mean, but to me, SOB 21 was a very, very big deal. I mean, it allows the banks to custody the coins. It will allow loans against the coins. I mean, it it drags the coins into the normie TradFi financial system where they really hadn't been up until this time, and that's really important.
Do you think that will really limit the sell pressure, just because people now saying, hey, I'm holding this and I'm going to lend against it now, I'm not going to sell
It's
it?
a great question. I mean, for those of us who have coins that we bought at a lot lower prices, I mean, instead of selling a coin, you might just say, well, I'll borrow against it. I mean, certainly it could. I mean, certainly it will. Yeah, I think it could and it will. Historically, the coin lending services have been relatively expensive. I've looked at it, and I think they're in the kind of 11 to 15% range, range, which
that's what I see.
Isn't that particularly attractive to me? But I mean, if somebody were to come to me and say, well, we'll lend you at the Fed funds rate of 4.5% or something, okay, that's a little different. Maybe I would take a loan out against some of my coins, but it's we'll just have to see how it develops. But I think that we can now assume that Wall Street and the major financial institutions are now in the game. Just like other nation states are now in the game. We now know that Saudi Arabia and Oman and UAE are all accumulating coins. We heard that through Paul Manafort and Matthew Pines at the Bitcoin Policy Institute. Basically passed that information along to me at a party. And so, I think there's just a lot of stuff going on. I mean, Saylor calls it, we're now kind of in that golden age, gold rush part of Bitcoin development. And I really think we are. I mean, I think the ETF was huge, absolutely huge. And Subtrona was another piece of it. And it's just, and now, I mean, and the BlackRock flipping, that was huge too. I mean, Larry Fink hated it, looked at it, analyzed it, said, you know what, I either got to get on board with this or I'm going to get crushed. And so now he figured out how to make money on it with launched an ETF, and it's the largest ETF, best performing ETF ever in terms of growth and size. So I think we're in a situation where a lot of things are lined up in a favorable manner for Bitcoin. I mean, related to all this, and this is talked about in the book, it's just, the government financial situation is just becoming extremely dire. I mean, we're up against the debt ceiling. The reverse repo fund has been run down. I mean, and so and Trump has already called for lower interest rates. I know the Fed's going to push back on that, but when push comes to shove, will they be able to? If they don't push, if they don't cut rates, I think there's a decent chance we'll have some kind of a nasty event that will then force them to cut rates. And the bottom line is, you and I have discussed so many times, is that the system is structured to require inflation, and if they do not get inflation, the system's going to die. So they're going to get inflation, and how does one protect oneself against inflation? Well, you own things they can't inflate. And the two choices are Bitcoin and gold, and Bitcoin's superior to gold, but gold's not a terrible choice. It's just a less good choice.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I want, really quick before we get to that, I want to get your take on Bitcoin being, everyone looks at it as a store of value, and it's a cover from monetary inflation, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing I think that and Jeff Booth obviously talks about this all the time, right? Being a neutral money that captures deflation. How do you, like, it's really the apex predator asset to me, because it captures both deflation and inflation. I would love for you to just unpack that a little bit, and stripping monetary premium from all other assets. Yeah.
As we know, it's a deflationary currency because there's a fixed supply of it, and you've got fundamentally, you're over time getting a more efficient world, and it can produce more.
How do you explain to people or see it? Because to me, I look at it as both a cover from inflation, but also maybe more importantly, deflation in this technologically advancing world.
It is deflationary in currency, and I talk about this in the book. I mean, and deflation is good, and we need to. There's a chapter in the book called "Embrace Deflation," which we really need to do. And that's the thesis. Jeff's whole thesis is that, technology is relentlessly deflationary, and we're running a monetary system that requires inflation. And so the two of those just aren't compatible, and it's a problem. And he's right. And so Bitcoin fixes this because it is a deflationary currency. And over time, everything gets cheaper in Bitcoin terms because there's a fixed amount of Bitcoin. And that's a good thing. So yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time in the book talking about how part of how we got into this big mess that we're in right now is that the Keynesian model was always fundamentally wrong. But they managed to just keep papering it over and kicking the can down the road. The problem is we're now so far down the road, and the can's gotten so big that you can't kick it anymore, or it's close to being unkickable. And so something's got to give, and they're either going to. I mean, and that's actually how I got the name of the book, because what I think is coming is, they're going to have to do another big print. I mean, they've already done a couple. I mean, 2008 was a big print, 2020 was a bigger print, and now they're going to have to do a very big print. Because of the way the system is structured, where they can't service the existing debt unless we print. What's amazing to me is that we've got these enormous government deficits, 1.8 trillion last year, running at a higher rate than that now. And, ostensibly the market, things are healthy. I mean, we've got a record stock market, we got pretty low unemployment, and we got, high but reasonable inflation. So with all of those things, we're still running this huge deficit. It's like, what? How is that? So imagine the stock market breaks, imagine unemployment goes up, tax receipts go down. I mean, the deficit's going to only get worse. And kind of the way I look at it, Brandon, is, the U.S. government's kind of like that family that, takes out new credit cards and gets more credit to pay the minimums on the prior credit cards. You know what I mean? And because that's what they do, right? They issue more debt, and they spend more than they bring in, and that means they have to issue debt. They issue the debt, and that goes into a fixed size bond market that causes interest rates to go up, and then they do it again, and interest rates going up, makes their deficit bigger, so they got to issue even more debt, and this is a debt doom loop, and so it's a cycle. It's a very negative feedback loop cycle that either ends with everything kind of blowing up, or everything kind of crashing. I mean, it's either massive inflation or massive deflation, or maybe even some combination of the two. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's pretty obvious to me that it can't continue in the current system, and they can't hold it together, I don't think, for more than another year or two. I really don't. They used a lot of tricks last year. They ran down the reverse repo, account. Yellen termed out. She did not term out the debt. She went to very short-term notes. I mean, here's the thing. They really, really need to get interest rates down. Powell says he don't want to do it because he's trying to be Volcker, but my gut is he's going to have to do it, or he's going to be forced to do it. I mean, they've got to take interest rates down, because everyone's buying our government debt's buying the short-term stuff. And so if the rates in the short term get very low, well, that'll actually help the deficit. Now, what it won't do is it won't help the inflation picture, because low rates in an economy that's full employment, that's going to stoke inflation, right? So they're really, the Fed's kind of trapped. I mean, they know they've got an inflation problem. They know they haven't completely solved it, but they've also got a debt problem, and they know that without printing more money, the debt structure isn't going to hold together. So it's quite a predicament that they're in, and it'll be very interesting to see how they play it. I mean, it's like, get your popcorn. I mean, I've got lots of scenarios in my mind, but I really don't know exactly what will happen. It depends on how all the actors involved behave.
I want to talk about gold, because obviously that's your background and
Sure.
where you come from. And it's one of the reasons I love and respect you. And I think many do, because you are someone who has a ton of wisdom, experience, and has many more years than really probably a lot of Bitcoin and crypto people out there, right? So you've seen all this, and you were able to humble yourself and then come all the way and transition to a Bitcoin world, which, not many people have been able to do yet. So in saying all that, gold's ripping, silver's ripping. I would love for you to unpack what's going on here for anyone who's been paying attention for the ills of the system and why things are changing to a Bitcoin standard, and what you just outlined. So I would love for you to unpack this.
And this is actually in the book too. I mean, we're in a sovereign debt crisis. Let's face it. I think that started really with the war in the Ukraine. It was when the real interest rate started to diverge from the price of the sovereign of the assets that are sound money, gold and Bitcoin. And since that time, gold and Bitcoin performance has just crushed, bonds and sovereign debt. The gold was the best form of sound money until Bitcoin came along. Bitcoin's a much better form of sound money today. What's going on in gold today specifically is that it just broke out to a new all-time high. And some people are attributing, I've been watching and reading some of the stuff online, watched a few pods, and I think it's more likely that just what's going on is there are actually more and more, and this is a chart I saw that was rather compelling. There are more and more people asking for physical delivery of their gold. And why do people do that? Well, because they don't necessarily trust the custodians of the gold, and that's always been the issue with gold. They don't trust the system. And those of us who've been in the gold world for a very long time know that they have created a much larger number of paper claims, in our opinion, than they have underlying ounces of gold. So this is the gold market, very much like the banking market. If people are familiar with banking, they understand fractional reserve lending, which is to say that a bank can lend out more than it has in deposits, right? Because not everyone comes and asks for their deposit back at the same time. And that's how the money supply grows. That's the money multiplier. Well, that actually started way back when with goldsmiths in Europe in the Middle Ages. But it's continued to this day, where I think there are more paper receipts for gold than there are underlying ounces. The amount of that is up for debate, but it could be anywhere between 10 claims for every 1 ounce, 100 claims for every 1 ounce. So, what I see going on, what we can see in the data, is that there are big entities actually asking and saying, well, yeah, that's right. I know you say you're holding gold for me and I've got a paper claim for it. Why don't you send it to me? Why don't you actually give me the gold and I'll store it myself in my safe or my own depository? That started to really increase, which to me indicates that people are starting to say, hey, hang on a second. Maybe I don't trust these people who say they're holding my gold. And I, many of us, even Kaiser before he started in Bitcoin, always thought that was the Achilles heel of the precious metals market. They'd manipulated it with paper, but if every paper holder said, please give me the physical, there wouldn't be enough physical to go around. And so I think that's what's driving, the breakout in gold right now. Also that, and just the general move toward sound money post Trump. So Trump, it's an interesting situation that we've all got to deal with here. Crypto, Trump got elected for a lot of different reasons, but frankly, he got helped by the Bitcoin people and the crypto people. And somewhere along the line, when he wasn't sure if he was going to win, and I saw him speak last summer, and I saw RFK speak last summer at the conference, he realized that, hey, this is a libertarian constituency that would be amenable to my message if I would support them. So he agreed to pardon Ross, which he lived up to that commitment. And he said, I think I support Bitcoin. And he widened it out to say, not only do I support Bitcoin, but I support crypto as well. And, as we all know, there are two camps here. And there are hardcore maxis who hate actually everything that's crypto. There are people who are, hardcore crypto and don't really believe in Bitcoin, they think, and so forth. But, and I personally think a lot of the crypto world is fraudulent and shitcoins and not worth the time of day and has done a lot to damage our cause. But let's face it, there are a lot of people in that area. Many of them made big donations, political donations to Trump. Many of them got people to vote for Trump. And so I think they feel, based on all of that they should have a seat at the table in, the Bitcoin crypto policy of the Trump administration.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's, Bitcoiners, we have to hold true to our ethos, and it's all roads lead to Bitcoin anyway, right? Like we wanted the fight to be over tomorrow. All roads lead there. We know that. It's the Trojan horse. And I think that's, like you said, we have to take the good with the bad, and that's it. But it all does funnel there. And all you have to do is look at what are our enemies doing. Like, you don't see Putin buying XRP or Ethereum, or like, you don't see those things happening, right? Like, watch people's actions, not their words. And I think that should give people sound money, good, the freedom fighters. That should give you the hope.
It does. I mean, we here's the great news. I mean, we really are winning. I mean, it's just getting
absolutely
getting overwhelmingly obvious that we're winning. And so we're about to enter that really steep part of the slope of the curve, which is why it's extremely hard to predict where we're going. I mean, whether it's 200 or a million. I mean, it's somewhere in that range.
Right.
But we're going higher. I mean, a lot higher. So, and I'm here for it. I mean, it works for me. I mean, but I'm also here because, it's not just number go up. I mean, I'm here for Bitcoin defunding the governments and, maybe, ending the wars and so much other bad stuff that these large sclerotic governments have done. And they've done just so much bad stuff. And, it's so refreshing to see the younger generation understand that and recognize that this is the solution, that Bitcoin is the solution to these problems.
Hold on 1 second. If you are holding your Bitcoin on an exchange still or sharing your keys and your KYC information with a third party, everything you're learning about right now is completely moot. This is your wake-up call. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. Bitcoin is the first and only asset in human history where humans can actually custody entirely their asset. Custody sounds daunting at first, and believe me, it was for me 10 years ago, and I missed a year or two of massive gains, and I don't want that to be you. It's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Asbach and the Bitcoin Way. His team will train you to do it right the first time. We just interviewed Tony the other day, has 50,000 views, an unbelievable response. People love him and his story and what he has to share in his mission. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. So quit sitting on your hands like I did a decade ago and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/Brandon. Now back to the show. What do you want to see with Bitcoin in the sense of, with the Trump administration? Is it removal of capital gains? Is it, a de minimis, under a certain amount of transaction where it's not taxed? Like what is your hope?
Yeah, those are great questions. Well, I think they should open up with saying every Bitcoin transaction under $1,000 isn't taxed. I mean, that's a no-brainer because as a practical matter, they're not getting taxed now anyway. All of us have taken sats and used them to pay for things. And, we may have a lower basis in those sats, but we did it through Lightning and they can't track that. So they might as well just, memorialize the fact that small Bitcoin transactions shouldn't be taxed. Hopefully they'll then get to the point where all Bitcoin transactions shouldn't be taxed and Bitcoin itself shouldn't be taxed because it's becoming a form of money. But I think we're a little further away from that occurring. I want to hear them say that they intend to start accumulating Bitcoin. And I want to hear them, very loudly support and pressure senators and congressmen to support the Lummis bill.
The like-kind redemption. I'd love for you to kind of unpack this and what it means potentially for the average guy, and how this changes things.
Yeah. So let's talk about why you might care about that, and let's talk about how you own Bitcoin. There are two, as you know, but most of your listeners probably know, but maybe some don't. There are really two ways to own Bitcoin. You can kind of own it natively, cold storage. You own the keys. You control it. You have a ledger, a Trezor, a cold card, whatever, and you're sovereign. You're self-sovereign, I guess we call it. You can go anywhere in the world with your 12 or 24 words, and you could access your Bitcoin, access your wealth. Okay, that's the highest and best way to do it, in my opinion, because the government doesn't need to know you have it, although they could figure it out, based on where you bought it and the transfers you've done. And you could always say, hey, I don't have the keys anymore. I lost it. Tough darts, government, you can't grab it. The next layer, obviously, that opened up the floodgates of a lot of capital coming into Bitcoin were the ETFs, which were approved last January, February, and fastest growing ETF ever in terms of assets under management. Now, what happens there is BlackRock buys it, Fidelity buys it, they hold it for you. They're doing all the key management, so there's no way they're going to lose the keys because they've got layers and layers of protection. And you're just getting a ride on your stock that goes up and down with the price of Bitcoin. And that's okay. I mean, that's all right. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that is, let's say the government gets really aggressive and decides, this Bitcoin thing is really killing us and we need to stop it. Let's do an executive order like Roosevelt's 6102 order, where we say, what, the government is going to seize we don't think Bitcoin's in the national best interest. We're going to seize it all. We'll give you cash for your coins. You have a coin that's worth 104. We'll send you $104,000 in cash, but you got to send us the coin. And it would really be easy for the government to do that because they would just call Fidelity, they call every major ETF, and the ETFs would be forced to comply by the law. So, so more or less you would get what your cash value of Bitcoin was right at the time that you sold yours, but you wouldn't get any of the upside. And of course that's theft. I mean, in my view, but it's possible they'll do it. So having the right to, what is it? What was the wording they used to basically pull it out of the fund? There was a term you used for it.
The like-kind redemption.
Like-kind redemption, right?
Yeah.
Having a like-kind redemption says that, okay, and I think, don't get me wrong, Brandon, I don't think they're going to let you pull out a tenth of a coin. I mean, I think they're probably going to, if they get it approved, they're going to say, okay, well, look, if you're a really big guy and you've got your Bitcoin in our fund, and you decide, I'd rather take it out of my fund. But right now, if it goes up a lot and you're in their fund, when the minute you sell it, they're going to create a tax event and they're going to send it to the IRS. You're going to have to pay taxes on it. And, somebody might think, well, I really don't want to leave it in your fund, but I don't want to sell it and go buy it again because then I have to pay taxes on the transaction. So I'd like a like kind in order to eliminate the risk of the 6102 confiscation And in order to address the issue of selling it to pay taxes to buy it again, because you wouldn't get as much because you'd have to pay the tax, maybe we should allow you to do a like-kind redemption, which is just to say, I've got X number of shares. It represents Y amount of Bitcoin. I'll give you those shares back. You give me the Bitcoin. Now, this has not been approved yet. I think BlackRock applied for it, but it's they're trying to get it. So it's an idea, and I think it would be very positive if they did get it. Okay.
Do you think that, so there's been a lot of like just charts lately on Bitcoin Twitter, different stuff, and the average guy can't afford anything, so retail is kind of dunzo. And what is your take on like the sovereign wealth funds and the nation states and most of the capital? I'd love for you to kind of unpack for the average viewer, because you hear so many people saying, oh, it's diminishing returns in Bitcoin, like look at the average guy can't buy it anymore. But like you just mentioned, this made me think of it. 1-2% of the world's assets are in Bitcoin right now. Could you just unpack that a little bit and why Bitcoin has so much upside?
Yeah, it's actually only 0.2%. So if you
yes.
Bitcoin could go to $1 million a coin, 10x from here, and it'd still only be 2% of the world's assets. And it's a great question. I've been encountering a lot. Well, yeah, I get it. You may be right, but gosh, I got to pay 100,000 for what you bought for 20.
Yeah, unit count bias. Yeah.
So you get price bias, and I say no. You're looking at it from the wrong model. You're looking at it from a trees don't grow to the sky investing model. What you got to look at it from is kind of more of a replacement cost model, that fiat's going to fail and Bitcoin's going to replace it. And if that's the case, with fiat, you're in a burning fire or you're in a burning theater and you got smoke coming up. And so what's the price? What's the value of the price of getting through that door or the exit so you don't get burnt? It's unlimited in fiat terms. So in my view, that's kind of where we're going. And, 5 or 10 years from now, it'll be at $1 million or, even quicker than that. And, everyone will be saying, well, God, I wish I bought it 100,000. So you've got to kind of flip the thing. I don't think there's anybody in Bitcoin who doesn't feel like they paid too much when they bought it. They hated the fact that it was where it was when they bought it. But, what I always say is just wait 5 years and, you'll feel like you're a genius. Hey, I bought some at the peak pre the SBF crash. I bought some at 65. And when it went to 15, I wasn't feeling great about it, but I knew I wasn't wrong. And now it's at 104 and, someday it'll be 204. So if I paid 65 for that, so what? You know what I mean? So it's you just have to get into it wherever it is at any given point in time, and then you have to let it compound. It's going to compound consistently and patiently for years and years, and that's really your friend. It's time in the market that creates great returns. You can't really time the market per se. So it's a hard one to get your head around, though. I will say that's the biggest objection I've encountered recently. Prior to that, the biggest objection was, well, the government's going to ban this. It's a nice libertarian fantasy, but it's never going to happen. Well, then the ETF got approved, and so they kind of had to throw that one out. So, but yeah, the price is a problem. And you say, well, it's too expensive, I can't buy it. I think some other people who aren't, if you're not terribly sophisticated, some people make the, well, I can't afford 100,000. Well, of course not, but you can buy, a tenth of a coin or 1/100th of a coin. You can put $100 into Bitcoin. You can put any number into Bitcoin. It's divisible to 100 million Satoshis. So that's not really a stopper,
Where do you see that going, Larry? Because you talked about the power law, say 200,000 is kind of like your low end of the low rung on the ladder this cycle. We talked about Dr. Jeff, so 475, Samson's at $1 million, Jack Mallers is 250 to $1 million. How do you kind of like what model do you kind of what's the Larry model? Like, how do you kind of see that? Because it's like you said, the big print, we had 5-10 trillion, just printed in the last 5-6 years. Is it 10, 20, 50 trillion this next time? Like,
I think it is. Bernanke printed, 3 or 4, and then that became, 5 to 7. And now, I think the next one is 10 to 15 or maybe more. A lot of it has to do, there are a lot of policy choices that get made, but a lot of it has to do with quote unquote something breaking. It kind of depends on, a crisis. Like if, for example, the stock market were to fall or unemployment, or unemployment were to squirt up and people were to start to get cautious. And there's just a lot of stuff lining up, Brandon, that leads me to believe that, we're going to, it's very possible we're going to break the power law model on the upside here in this cycle. I think this cycle hits 200 very easily. I think, That's kind of a done deal. And then, it could, with some of these other things kicking in, excuse me, it could go a lot farther. We just don't know. Samson thinks it goes to 1 million. I don't know. It's possible. Dr. Jeff thinks it goes to 500,000, 700,000. Anything's possible. As we all know with this asset, it trades like a wild animal now. It could also go to those numbers and then have a decent sized correction too, which it's also done in the past. So keep that in mind. I'm not sure I want to be buying it at 750, but
In saying that, we want to go back really quick to the
Sure.
gold thing. Do you have a ratio? Is there a Lepard model where because you've always said gold moves first and snuffs things out, and then Bitcoin rips, after that, and
Well,
Bitcoin really is the mover, right?
yeah,
So
Bitcoin's going to continue to massively outperform gold, and Bitcoin is going to eventually demonetize gold. But
mhm.
I say eventually cautiously because it doesn't happen overnight. And so, in this inflationary cycle, I have every confidence gold will get to 5,000, 10,000, maybe 15,000. But while it's doing that, 5,000 would be, almost a double. Bitcoin's going to go from 100,000 to 1 million, and from 1 million to 2 million. So, which is going to outperform Bitcoin by a huge measure. But gold isn't going to go away because there's 6 or 8 billion people on the planet. A lot of them think gold is sound money, and the base money, the fiat currencies are all failing. So they're both going to go up a lot. But Bitcoin's going to continue to demonetize gold. It's going to demonetize real estate. There's so much monetary premium in things where it really shouldn't be there. Real estate, it's a place to live. It's nice. The nice things, it can't print any more of it, but it only has, it ought to be valued on its utility, not because it's a store of value, because there are much better stores of value, Bitcoin being one of them. So, yeah, that's how you get to just numbers that are much higher than what we're looking at today, as these other things become demonetized.
Did you see? I have one more follow up on this
Yeah.
gold thing,
Yeah.
and Sailor. I want to get your thoughts on. But did you see Mark Moss's presentation when you guys were over in the Middle East when he
Yeah.
broke down the numbers? That to me was one of the best breakdowns of the numbers. To your point, it kind of visually charted out what you just said of gold's going to go up. A lot of these assets are going to go up seemingly in nominal value, but Bitcoin's going to continue eating these things up. And he kind of played
Yes.
it out over 50 years. And it was fascinating because you
Yeah.
still see Bitcoin only being whatever. It's a small part in a sense of maybe 1/5 of the monetary value in the world. But at that point, Bitcoin's worth like $84 million. But these
Yeah.
other things are still massive. And I think that was the
Well,
point he was trying to make.
yeah, there will always be stocks, and
Right.
gold will, I think, always have some value because it's rare and scarce. It'll trend toward, quote unquote, what I call jewelry value.
Mm,
But Yeah, no, it's there's a lot of room ahead, and that's why those of us who are in this area and in this trade are so excited. I've said it many times. I say it in the book. This is the most asymmetric bet I've ever seen. And generally speaking, to get a really asymmetric bet means you can only lose 1x and you can make 2 to 500x. Generally, to get a good asymmetric bet, you've got to find, a company that's growing, that's going to be well managed, and it's going to do the right things. And so you're dependent upon the management team. For every Microsoft, there are a lot of shitty companies that are, that were in tech that weren't so well managed, didn't become Microsoft. And here you really don't have a management team. You have the core developers, but everyone votes on it. I think the protocol is pretty well set. We had the fork wars, we had the block size wars. All that got kind of resolved. I don't think it's changing from here forward. So with that in mind, now it's just on autopilot. It's just going to run itself out until, we're doing transactions to Satoshis, and everyone's going to say, what's the dollar? There won't be a dollar value for Bitcoin because nobody will use dollars anymore. That's where we're headed. Now, some would say that's 50 years out, and maybe they're right. I tend to think it's a lot shorter than that, a lot shorter. But we'll have to see. It's, the trend though is extremely clear, which is why, Saylor's strategy of sell the, it's just Gresham's law on a mass scale, right? Sell the thing that's
yeah.
depreciating, the dollar, buy the thing that's going up, Bitcoin. Okay, that's it. It's not any more
Yeah.
complicated than that. It's just you do that and rinse, wash, repeat, and just let time do its thing. Because it's true that in 5 years, Bitcoin will be somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million a coin.
So the last thing on gold really quick, what are your thoughts on Saylor saying we should sell some of our gold that we have in the United States and buy Bitcoin with it?
I don't think it's as crazy as some people have said it is. I mean, I think that gold is going to get demonetized. It's interesting because there's a lot of debate around this whole area of, do you want the national federal government to be strong? I mean, Peter Schiff said, well, if you're saying the government should buy, Bitcoin, that you're being a statist because you want to prop up the government. And there's a whole hardcore libertarian part of the Bitcoin world that says, like, screw propping up the government, screw a strategic reserve, screw Jason Lowry. I just want the fucking government to fail. Let's just let them go bankrupt and fail, and we'll figure out some better solution. I'm sympathetic to that, but I also think that there still is a little bit of a great powers competition left, and there are these spheres of the world, and China's one, and Russia's one, and the Middle East is another, and these spheres all have influence over other parts of the world, and I honestly I'd rather, I think, live under our rule of law than China's rule of law or Russia's rule of law, and our political system, as broken, as dysfunctional as it is, I still think it's better than theirs. And so I do kind of want to see the U.S. way prevail. And that being the case, I want to see the U.S., if we're going to do strategic reserve kind of stuff, it might as well make it in the thing that's the best, which is Bitcoin. And so, Russia and China have bet on gold, very bigly. I mean, especially China. Russia, I think, might be stacking Bitcoin. I don't know, but I tend to believe they get it a little bit better. And so, in a sense, if we go with Bitcoin and they go with gold, we're leapfrogging them, and very much the way that, in the early 1800s, the U.S. and England went with gold. As Britain got off the silver standard, the pound as the standard, which was originally their currency, and the gold became the backing of the pound. And China and India didn't do that; they stuck with silver, and they suffered massively as a result of that. And so I want to see the U.S. pick the right thing, which is Bitcoin. And if we were to sell the gold, I mean, I think I laugh a little bit at Saylor's comment because he says, "Oh yeah, we should sell our gold." Well, okay, Michael, that's assuming we still have it, because if those of us in the gold camp who've been watching carefully for a long time now and recognize that all our gold is unaudited since the 50s, despite the occasion Mnuchin flew down to Fort Knox and showed a few bars, okay, but that's not the whole thing. We're not so sure we have the gold we say we have, so. Hard to sell it if we don't really have it. I think, we've got to be careful here, though. There's also timing. If the U.S. government were tomorrow say we want to go to Bitcoin as the reserve currency to replace the dollar, the dollar would plummet and we'd have massive inflation. And so, my sense is, they're playing with dials that you can't go from, 1 to 10, in a few minutes. We got to trend in the right direction. Which is to say trend toward sounder money. I mean, my sense is right now is Besant is trying to figure out what his next move is. I mean, he knows he's got a big problem with his debt. He knows he's got to fund out a lot of debt short term. Trump's already said to Powell that rates are too high. And so they're trying to figure out what their next moves are monetarily to get us going in the right direction. And it's, as my partner says, as David Foley says, I mean, this is brain surgery. I mean, it's really complicated shit. And they've got to be very careful to move in a way that's intelligent so that the markets don't, freak out and blow up. But honestly, I mean, having a hedge fund guy running it, hedge fund guy who's a sound money guy who knows financial history extremely well. Those are the way I describe Scott Besant. I mean, honestly, you couldn't think of anybody better suited to try and get us through this transition. I mean, he's pretty well suited to this. And in the book, actually, I talk about this. I mean, I talk about what I call kind of a monetary reset. And that, to me, look, inflation is in the cards. I mean, there's just no way around it. We got too much debt. We've got to devalue that debt. We've got to devalue the dollar. So the question is, are we going to do it in a sloppy way where something breaks and they print a bunch more? Or are we going to do it in a long drawn out way where everyone suffers with, kind of stagflation and a terrible economy? Or are we going to do it just in a one-time way where we say, hey, we're buying this much Bitcoin, we're buying this much gold, we're going to back the dollar with gold or Bitcoin or both, and we're going to stop the inflation dead in its tracks. And whatever the new reset price is would be very, very inflationary, but it would be a one-time hit to everybody, and then we'd go forward on a sound money standard. And that's, to me, that's the fairest and best way to get from this broken system we're in right now to a new system that has sound money at its base. Because that's the goal. When we get to, there have been a lot of countries that have had hyperinflations or very high inflations for brief periods of time, and you can fix it. I mean, this is not rocket science. You can fix it by taking your currency and linking it to something that's limited in supply. And when you do this, things get better. I mean, surprise, quickly, because everyone just reprices on the new thing and all the prices settle out where they should be. And then the economy runs and you've solved the problem. But, I can't for a moment suggest that this isn't going to have some pain for somebody, and that it's not going to be tumultuous as it goes down, because it will be, and I mean, specifically, there's going to be huge pain for long-term debt holders. I mean, they're just not going to, they're going to lose a lot of the value of what they think they own. So,
do you subscribe to Brent Johnson's dollar milkshake theory? Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, that's what it sounds like. That's what you're kind of getting at in a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Brent's a good friend and a good guy, and he's right about it. And he ultimately is kind of where we are too. I think he just thinks they can string it on for a lot longer. And to be honest with you, looking backwards, they have strung this thing out a lot longer than I ever thought it would take. And
same.
And so I could be dead ass wrong. I mean, maybe they do string this out for another 20 years. I hope not. That's part of why I'm pushing so hard with the book and what I do podcast. I mean, I do all of this because I think this is the core issue that's the problem in our economy and our society. And so I want to try and accelerate the solution to this issue, because I think that's what makes things better. So, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
If you're liking this interview, but you're just wondering, you know what, Brandon, this is amazing stuff. And I get you have these guests on and they're talking about how orange pilling the world is so great and how Bitcoin is going to take over the world. How in the world do I educate my family and friends? How do I get people to understand what most people just don't care about, quite honestly? Bitcoin trading cards is the way to do that. When you open up these cards, you see the foil cards, you see the chase, you see the glossy cards, young, old, boy, girl, man, woman, it doesn't matter. People love these cards. It's awesome because they're super valuable, by the way. Amazing little side note. However, it Trojan horses them into the most important thing of the day. It's not politics. It's not all the things that we fight about. It's changing the money, fix the world. Bitcoin trading cards is the best way that we have going in order to do that, no matter who you are. You're going to love them. Playable characters 10 for 10% off at checkout. Playable characters 10 off at checkout. btc-tc.com. You're going to absolutely love these things. Now back to the show. Where do you kind of see this again? Like the status line, as Peter Schiff said, like Bitcoin's infiltrating all these things. Is this truly the Trojan horse? Are we looking at central, what are we looking at here?
It is a Trojan horse, and more importantly, this is all part of what I call the Overton window shift. I mean, you can be sure that Lagarde did not want to have to talk about Bitcoin. I mean, you can be sure she was kind of, but the Czech guy who apparently I think met with Bob Burnett, who's a good friend of mine, runs Barefoot Mining, great guy. I mean, I think he was instrumental in orange pilling this guy, right? And so, the Czech guy is like, hey, we're going to study this, we're going to think about it. Well, he's part of the EU, and so suddenly, Lagarde has to respond, right? And so this is what happens. I mean, this is how the Overton window shifts, where it's kind of, I know that there are investment manager consultants, and a famous one in Boston actually called Cambridge Associates, who hated Bitcoin but what happens is their clients are coming to them and saying, hey, this is a great performing financial asset. What do we do with it? What you got to tell us about this. And so they were kind of forced to study it and come up with an answer. It wasn't a particularly positive one. It was like, well, it's extremely risky, and if you want to have a 1% allocation, fine, which is really the wrong answer. But my point is that the marketplace of ideas, the Overton window shifting, the knowledge and the observation that this thing has run for 16 years, and we've got 400 million addresses and 100 million users, and all these blocks that haven't been corrupted, and price performance that blows the socks off of everything else. It is forcing the world to come to terms with it. And you can ignore Bitcoin if you want to, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring Bitcoin, because it's going to go to millions of dollars a coin. And if you knew about it and you didn't take the time to study it and think about whether that was something you wanted to do, you missed it. Not entirely, because once it goes to 2 million, it'll go to 10. But the point is, at every stage of the way, just like, I ignored it at 100, before it was at $100, because I thought all these things have failed. There were other experiments that failed, and I ignored it, that cost me. But so, everyone's ignored it at times, and everyone. I mean, hell, Saylor was a skeptic. Remember in 2013, he was a skeptic and thought it was a fraud. But he revisited it, and so it's never too late to turn around and go, you know what, I misunderstood this, and now, I mean, I hope someday Peter Schiff will do that, but I kind of doubt it. But maybe he will.
I mean, it's like not adopting gunpowder, right? It's the safe quote from, right? Like you can't ignore the consequences of reality.
That's exactly right.
Speaking of Peter Schiff, we mentioned him a second ago, and just the status stuff, and there's a divide between libertarians, gold bugs, Bitcoiners, whatever it is, between the government's getting in. I think Pierre Rochard I forget who it was debating last year on stage about whether a government should get into Bitcoin or not, and like you said, same with me. I empathize with both sides, and I get it. But wasn't this inevitable? This is stuff that Hal Finney talked about, 15 years ago, right? Yeah. Like this was inevitable that nation states and corporations, everyone's getting in. It's permissionless money, is it?
I mean, it's like, hey, we got money that can't be diluted. What did you think was going to happen? I mean, I can't remember who put that tweet out. It was a brilliant tweet. I mean, it's just, it's just obvious. I mean, to me, this whole thing has been very obvious and very clear for a long time. And again, that's why I tried to write the book, because the book, where the book fits in the world is it's aimed at trying to get normies to understand what you and I know. So I've tried to write it in an engaging style. I try to tell my personal story. I've tried to, try to make it fun. There's kind of a hero's journey in there, all that stuff. And the notion is, look, I mean, you're getting screwed. You may not quite understand why, especially no way you'd understand why. This isn't your area of expertise, right? But this book will kind of explain why, and that's depressing. It'll emphasize how screwed you are. I mean, I've got all these great examples of the dumb shit, the unfair shit they've done. And then, but there's an optimistic side, which is, guess what? We've got a fix for you. Do you know what I mean? So listen to this, because technology is going to bail us out. And it's as simple as, jumping on this new thing that's coming to the rescue. And many of us we're already on the lifeboat, and all we're trying to do to you, fellow citizen, is suggest to you that these lifeboats are great and you ought to come join us, because it'll have a big impact on your financial situation if you do. That's really the model, that we're going for.
And it's funny too. Like I was talking to a priest friend that we have, and he was just saying, like, I mean, the Bible, for all intents and purposes, is a book of principles wrapped in stories, so humans can understand them in essence. So that's why I think that
great point.
Your book,
I hadn't even thought about that. This isn't like the Bible.
Yeah,
but it is the same.
No, I don't want to make that connection necessarily, but the way it was written in a sense is similar, and that's I think what makes things run stand the test of time is its principles and common sense and natural law wrapped in stories so humans can understand. So I think that's why it's very important. All right, so I've been saying to some other people, but I have not got the chance to say it to you yet, but there's a fair amount of books out there, whether it's, Lynn's or, there's other books, right? And it's like, okay, like I get it. And then I got it, I started reading it, and I couldn't put it down, which is funny because that's what I'm seeing other people say too, where it's like, okay. And then you read it and you're like, dang, there is like the hero's journey to it. There's all this that goes into it. And a lot of it only in a way that you can say. And again, that's why a lot of people love listening to you.
No, I mean, it's
in your voice.
Yeah. I'm irreverent, and I call these people out but it's got entertainment value, but if it keeps people focused on learning the lesson. And don't get me wrong, I borrowed heavily in this book from Lynn and Safe. I mean, and Jeff. I mean, I couldn't have written this book without. I mean, this is just the next logical. Yeah, this is just the next logical. Yep. It's like it's like blockchain. Yes. We're just building on each other, right? I mean, those books are fabulous books. They're great books. But what I saw an empty space in the market for was more of kind of an everyday man's book, because I've given Safe's book to people, I've given Lynn's book to people, and unless you're really down the rabbit hole, you love this stuff, they can be a tough slog, and I want a dental hygienist or, a taxi cab driver to be be in the airport, see this book, go, I wonder what that's all about. Pick it up, read it on the flight and go, oh my God, I get it. I get why I'm being screwed, and I get what I have to do about it. That's the mission, and so I'm not measuring this thing, Brandon, by how well it does in Bitcoin world. It's going to do great in Bitcoin world. You'll love it. I love
Right.
it. It's all good. What I'm measuring this by, when you give this to your family members who hate Bitcoin, or you give this to people who don't know anything about Bitcoin, do they read it and get it? And do they come back and say, "Oh gosh, thanks for giving me that book. I'm going to pass it along." I mean, that's the goal, right? I mean, my goal is to orange pill the whole goddamn world,
Yes.
and I mean, that's an unrealistic goal, but hey, you got to have a target, right? So
You gotta have a target. I love that.
yeah, and so
You're gonna do a great job.
that's the target.
You're gonna do a great job with it.
Well, we'll
Yes.
see. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to do it, to be honest with you. I mean, I think,
I've read a lot of these books. I've read a lot of them, and it was just something that I couldn't put down. It was just
that's music to my ears.
know.
What that tells me is that it'll work.
Yes.
Although again, you're biased because you're already deep down this hole. So
biased for sure, and you're a friend of mine, obviously a good friend, but it's at the same time, I mean, I was, it's just one of those things, you can't help it, right? Like, it's another Lynn book, and again, Lynn, fabulous, beyond smart, genius, but that's a little bit more of an academic
right.
book, right? Where this is definitely more the everyman.
This is a story,
and like you said,
this is a story.
Exactly.
This is Bitcoin as a story told through one man's eyes. That's what this is. And well people said. As we all know, people go to the movies, people watch TV, they want to hear stories. They want to, they don't go, they don't go to the library and study textbooks. But they
don't want logic. Yeah, exactly. They want stories and emotion.
Sometimes, that's true. But there's logic in this book. But it's got story wrapped.
It's wrapped in the stories.
Yeah, to make it fun and interesting. And so you're kind of like, you start reading it. You hear about, I did this, I did that, and you say, well, I want to hear, what's next? Okay, tell me about the next part of it. And you want to see the next chapter, right? That's the whole goal. That's how I wrote it.
Where can people find you? I'll link to your book. Where can people find you?
Lepard on Twitter, and EMA2 is my website. EMA2.com.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thanks. Good to see you, man. Take care.
If you can't get enough of these interviews and you want to deepen your education on sound money, wealth building, and freedom, you're not going to want to miss this playlist here. Happy binging. Check it out now. We'll see you inside.